Hey everybody, Alex here with Optimum Joy, and I have Pete Marlow, one of our therapists at the practice. And Pete, why don't you go ahead? We'll just dive right in. Tell
Mhm.
us what we're talking about today and like why it's important to you or how it's come up in your life.
Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about intrusive thoughts. The reason this came up in my mind was just having recently had a couple clients who were dealing with rational thoughts that weren't being made any better when I was utilizing CBT with them.
Mhm.
The clients just kept saying that the thoughts are, they just keep sticking in my mind. They're not going away,
Mhm.
even with thought disputation, that type of thing.
Yeah.
So I was talking with a friend who had read this book called Overcoming Unwanted Intrusive Thoughts and recommended it to me. When I was reading it, I realized this is what they're describing. And I really feel for anybody who deals with these types of thoughts because it would just be so difficult.
Well, so difficult and like often can be very disturbing to people.
Yes.
If
Yeah.
it's a little outside like social norms or
Hmm.
involves like safety issues and stuff like that, it can really be like a distressing, disturbing
Hmm.
experience for someone who's experiencing that and can't stop it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing too, is like, I think it's the part that you just mentioned, like, can't stop it because I'm a believer that like pretty much everybody has intrusive thoughts. And sometimes they can be disturbing. But like, just the majority of people are able to just ignore them, know that they're just thoughts and move on and not have it bother them 1 second. Uh,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. So what exactly are intrusive thoughts? If someone's kind of listening and they're
Mhm.
like, okay, I have things that pop in my mind, but is that an intrusive thought? Like what exactly is
Yeah.
it?
Yeah. So they're just passing thoughts that, like I said, basically everybody experiences. They jump in your mind and then back out again.
Mhm.
Um, Often they're just something simple, like when you're at work and think, "Oh, I really hope the power goes out because then I can just leave early." And so it can be normal stuff like that. For most people, even if the thought is weird or distasteful, it's just quickly forgotten. It doesn't bother them.
Mm.
But what turns them into like these bothersome and intrusive thoughts, the ones that cause distress, is when a person has an intrusive thought and then worries about what it might mean specifically about them, and they're just unable to shake it.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah,
So the kind of almost the stuckness of,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Like the book calls it stickiness, thought
I like that.
stickiness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, so really kind of, I think it's important what you're saying to normalize the fact that, even like mindfulness based practices tune into like almost watching your thoughts go by.
Hmm.
And the
Yeah.
fact that sometimes a thought or a feeling
Hmm.
isn't really in our control
Yeah. Yeah.
directly, that will sometimes just happen. But really
Hmm.
the like stickiness when it's like that doesn't when that becomes distressing or sticky, that's really kind of when intrusive thoughts are not great. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
So where do they come from in our brain, in our body? What's our how do these like fit within our system?
Yeah. So there's two different parts of our brain that we're going to talk about for that. So there's the amygdala, and that's home to just your alarm response system. Easy for me to say in our brains.
Right
Um,
right
yeah,
here on
yeah,
the right side, tucked away.
yeah. It produces the fight, flight, or freeze response, and just causes the body to go through a series of arousals. So, for example, adrenaline release, increases in heart rate, changes in breathing, hypervigilance, things like that. Those are all things that can be super helpful if you're actually in danger. And Unfortunately, though, the amygdala only has an on-off switch and it doesn't reason. So if you suffer from these intrusive thoughts that are distressing, your brain has learned to be afraid of these thoughts. The other part of the brain is the thalamus, and that's the part that sends. Uh, so, yeah, it sends out signals of possible danger as well.
Mm.
But that's the one that,
It's true. It's the thalamus is
yeah,
really honestly, it's kind of always scanning and works like hand in hand. Also, I think it's the maybe it's the hypothalamus. They also work with like memory recording and
yeah,
emotionality. So, That
Right.
would make sense that it's like if the amygdala is either on or off according to a threat, that the other piece is actually like scanning, scanning, scanning,
Yep.
even like those
Yeah.
thoughts. So are you saying that like those thoughts become a threat?
Yeah. So basically, So the two different parts are the cortex. I was also going to talk about the cortex, which is part of the brain. So the thalamus sends out this message,
Mhm.
or the signal. It gets to the amygdala about a half second quicker than the cortex,
Oh, interesting.
and the cortex is the part of the brain that actually has a little bit of reasoning. So it can tell you like, is this is this actually something I should be afraid of or not?
Mhm.
And like I said, unfortunately, the signal gets there a half second too late. So the amygdala gets the signal first, and it's just the on-off switch. Switch goes on, says this is dangerous, freak out, get
Yeah.
anxious about it.
That makes sense. So
Mm-hmm.
really, we're well, here's what you started off with saying. I was
Mm-hmm.
just having a conversation with someone the other day about anxiety, and that because intrusive thoughts actually would fall under the general, whether they're OCD or not, they fall under the general umbrella of anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways, anxiety is actually really functional because it's what, like, if you're a student, your anxiety is what's going to make you study for a test.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
so all people everywhere typically have
Yeah.
at least some level of anxiety that helps someone be
Yeah.
prepared. So I think
Mm-hmm.
what gets off in this system and within the brain is when
Mm-hmm.
it becomes an anxiety, it becomes a threat or a challenge, a stuck thing, a stickiness that actually doesn't
Yeah.
help you prepare for your life. It actually is inhibiting your life.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like we need the anxiety that gets us to study for the test, but you know.
Yeah, but then if it's actually, like, paralyzing or inhibiting you because what gets tied into
Mm-hmm.
the amygdala, fight or flight, freeze, fall, like, all those
Yeah.
other ones too, is kind of like,
Yeah.
I'm either gonna amp up and respond, or I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
paralyze, numb out, and kinda go into sleepy side, you know?
Right.
So if those thoughts are not really what's going on in life and they're amping you up or they're
Mm-hmm.
sleeping you out, then it's
Mm-hmm.
like, you can't really live life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
So
true.
something you were telling me, is that this book you're reading is that there's certain voices, and
Mm-hmm.
flesh that out. Tell us about what the book kind of named as the voices and how those
Yeah.
interact.
Yeah. So there's three different voices. Like you said, you got worried voice, false comfort, and wise mind. And worried voice kind of kicks off the anxiety. It asks the what if question. So it can be this voice can be irrational, perverse, or ridiculous. And it voices fears and doubts about the passing intrusive thought.
Mhm,
And then false comfort speaks next. It tries to calm worried voice,
mhm,
because false comfort is also disturbed by the passing intrusive thought and wants to feel comfortable again. Um, and so it tries to convince worried voice that the thought's not true. But unfortunately, like it's never able to calm it for more than like a brief moment.
yeah.
Um, yeah, because worried voice just comes back with a rebuttal
Mhm,
for like whatever false comfort says.
mhm,
So then it just adds fuel to the fire because uh, as worried voice keeps coming back and giving like rebuttals, it just solidifies the thought's legitimacy in your mind of, oh, I am this, or I do, you know, think these horrible things, like
I am
because
actually
I'm just a
unsafe.
bad
I don't
person.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm,
And then wise mind is just the mindful part or the mindful voice. It observes the thoughts and feelings of the person with perspective. It knows that the thoughts mean nothing, and that they're not facts, and they just encourage the person to let them be.
mhm, and wise mind, I mean, we've already kinda touched on this. Wise mind is a mindfulness practice.
Yeah.
You
Right.
know, the non-judgmental observation of your own
Mm-hmm.
self and your world, you
Mm-hmm.
know, more just from the stance of noticing, and then, like, you can take action on it, but it's more so I just had to notice what's going
Yeah.
on in me. So I like that, there's, like, the on one hand, it's like wise mind is the middle, and then you have, like,
Mm-hmm.
the worry that is a little
Yeah.
overactive, "I'm not safe, I'm not safe, I'm not safe," and then
Mm-hmm.
false comfort. It's not that comfort isn't good and true. It's just that these two pieces, the worry and the
Mhm.
false comfort, don't really believe each other.
Right.
So
Yeah.
kind of for like the wise mind to be like a little bit of a perspective looking down on both of them, being like, well, actually, you do need to be worried about this, or actually, like, we can take comfort in this as like
Yeah.
the more wise, kind of the older, wiser parent or older, wiser like
Yeah.
leader. Yeah.
Yeah. Parent,
Mm,
definitely.
mhm. Yeah. So what else can you tell us about just intrusive thoughts?
Yeah. So I mean, there's some different categories of intrusive thoughts that might be helpful to share with people. A few of them include just like morally distasteful thoughts. They're often related to sex or religion. There's big issue thoughts like not being able to accept uncertainty. Maybe you're concerned about the safety of your children or other loved ones.
Mhm.
Um, Questioning reality. Or what is life's like true purpose. Those can be thoughts that get stuck in our head. Nonsensical thoughts, questioning if you're losing your mind.
Sure.
Yeah, uh,
Mhm.
so many different ones out there. um, and then also um, just the fact that the book talks about how people who struggle uh, with these thoughts think if I have the thought, then it must be some deep unconscious desire of mine.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, when in reality, it's just a random passing thought
Mhm.
that flew into your mind like a fly, and it's just going to buzz right out again.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they get stuck in thinking that they will act on their intrusive thoughts, like if you're sitting in church on the weekend and you think like, what if I just start shouting obscenities right now? That's a definite like intrusive thought that some people have.
Yeah.
And these thoughts can feel really intense, and they might feel like they're actual impulses that are just fighting to come out.
Yeah.
And it can be the same with like self-harm intrusive thoughts yeah.
Yeah. Well, Pete, what's really landing for me is just how much you're normalizing the fact that this it's like a huge your normalizing of it is actually just causing a lot of empathy within me
Hmm.
that
Yeah.
um there are these different categories, and probably depending on your culture and your background,
Hmm.
if your culture is kind of purity based Christianity, to have intrusive thoughts
Hmm.
around sex,
Hmm.
or there's a lot of, what does someone do when like it pops like a more like like an like I'm trying to think of an example. Like I used to work with somebody who used to have thoughts pop up sexually around their family members.
Yeah.
That
Yep.
is like this person, she would never like to act on those sexual
Right.
thoughts that were intrusive in her real life,
Hmm.
but she was having them. And it's kind
Hmm.
of like just kind of normal. I feel like you're taking the pressure off that sometimes this is generally something that happens within our brain,
Hmm.
and also that there's a lot of empathy around how disturbing it is,
Oh
but that
yeah.
you really separated out thoughts and actions are two different things, which is like CBT in a way. You have thoughts,
Hmm.
behaviors, and feelings,
Hmm.
um, but that those things are kind of really separated out.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
And probably something we won't really get into here just for the sake of time is the fact that sometimes
Yeah.
thoughts and actions are correlated, and that's what we call obsessive compulsive disorder. The
Right.
obsessive thoughts leads to compulsive action, and that those two things
Hmm.
can be tied together, but um aren't always, tied together. So
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm. So wrap us up, Pete, with just like any resources, recommendations, just kind of anything helpful if someone is thinking like, "Oh yeah, like I have intrusive thoughts around this." Uh,
Yeah.
mhm,
Yeah. So I think just an important thing to tell people is just the more you fight a thought, the more it will persist in your mind. So when you have these thoughts, just don't involve yourself. Like false comfort wants you to.
mhm,
That voice in your head that's trying to comfort the worried voice.
mhm,
But just observe the thoughts without judgment, and have an attitude of acceptance,
mhm,
which I know to people going through this can seem like an empty like platitude, like, it's an empty thing, like, oh, okay, like that sounds easy enough for you to say. But I think basically, but then, like, I think another important piece is to seek therapy for it and meet with a counselor. They can help you go through some exposure work.
Mhm.
And what that involves, it does cause some discomfort, but in the end, you're trading one discomfort that will not go away with one that will just be for a time.
Yeah.
uh, yeah, so if you're able to face the intrusive thought through the exposure work, and not give into the back and forth between worried voice and false comfort, and just be able to learn how to let it, watch it in your brain back, bang around a little bit and then leave your mind,
Yeah.
then you'll realize that you have power over it.
Yep. I think almost the way I think about it is I'm going to prove to my own mind that I will be okay. So if someone has a fear of dogs,
Hmm.
and maybe the compul is like, well, that maybe isn't a good example, but essentially, like if someone has a fear of dogs, you start small with looking at pictures of dogs, actually,
Hmm.
to get some of that discomfort, but to watch yourself
Yeah.
make it through the moment. So it is that's the discomfort is like realizing, oh my gosh, I am like my fear is activated. And
Yeah.
slowly to kind of work up to different like larger stressors to maybe where someone would end up actually, like, being in the same room with a dog on a leash,
Hmm.
and it's like I can prove to my brain that I'm okay,
Yeah.
and it's not a false comfort, it's like a true comfort that I
Yeah.
actually can make it through this and stuff. So I think that that's really
Yeah.
the what you're talking about is exposure therapy, exposure work is really proving to yourself that you're safe.
Yep.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
and
Just proving
people
that. Yeah.
proving to yourself you're safe. Yeah, you're agreeing with
Yeah.
me?
Yep. I totally agree with you.
For a couple of therapists, we really like to chit chat, can't get a word in edgewise, eh? So will you say that book one more time, Pete, just in case somebody is
Yeah.
curious about it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's called Overcoming Unwanted Intrusive Thoughts. And it's written by Sally Winston and Martin Seif, is how I think you pronounce his last name. If you want
Wonderful.
to look it up on Amazon. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, maybe we'll try to like at least put the name and the title in the caption and stuff. But thank you so much,
Yeah.
Pete. I really appreciate it. This is one of those
Absolutely.
things that a lot of embarrassment and shame
Yep.
can cycle around because
Hmm.
if they're not socially acceptable thoughts or you feel like you're not strong enough to stop them, that can be
Hmm.
a really shame and embarrassing inducing thing. So I think
Hmm.
sometimes the more we talk about it, just the more that that's going to help people actually engage it and
Yeah.
hopefully increase their wise mind and a sense of peace, inside their own head.
Hmm.
So I
Hmm.
really appreciate it. Thanks a lot for coming on.
Yeah. You bet. Good talking to you.
Thanks, Pete. Bye.
Bye.